I'm 27 and my ex-wife is 25. I'll be referring to her as Kitty, and I'll call myself Tom. I'm calling her Kitty because she's as sneaky and dirty as a street cat. We've been married a little over 5 years and have a son who I'll call Junior because his real name is the same as mine. Junior is 4.5. Everything seemed good for my family until I got a rude awakening. I've got a job and make $33 per hour, while Kitty made $17 per hour. We lived well, have a nice apartment, and 2 newer cars. I've worked at my company since I graduated high school, and Kitty went back to work 7 months ago after Junior started preschool. Initially, she was working 20 hours per week, but bumped that up to 30 hours a few weeks before D-Day. I'm the youngest of 4 kids and my parents are older, and both are now retired. They watch Junior on the days when Kitty and I both worked. On those days, they take him to and from preschool, and Kitty picks him up at their house after her shift. We've got a great situation there as Junior loves his grandparents and loves preschool, so he's never had any separation anxiety being away from us. So, I'll now tell you how I accidentally discovered Kitty was cheating on me. Kitty works with a woman I'll call Nasty. I'm calling her that because this woman is just that. Nasty. She's 31 and has already been married and divorced twice. She has 1 kid who lives with her first husband full-time. Unfortunately for me, Kitty developed a close working friendship with Nasty. Nasty has worked at that company for 12 years, and from what Kitty explained, she is good at her job. Since she is, Nasty helps train new hires, and that's how Kitty and her first got acquainted. They never socialized outside of work, but did text often after work and on weekends. And once in a while, Nasty would drop by. I first met Nasty at their company picnic and immediately got bad vibes. Now, a little more on why I call her Nasty. Not only is she twice divorced and doesn't have custody of her child, she also lives with a guy that she is in a friends with benefit relationship with. And she and her friends with benefit regularly swing with other couples and hook up individually with whoever they want since they're just friends with benefit. The whole thing is sickening, and I told Kitty this multiple times. Kitty told me she didn't approve of Nasty's personal life either, but said she really appreciates her as a work friend, as she has helped her out with so many things. Though I didn't like Nasty, I didn't have a problem with Kitty being work friends with her, since they really never socialized beyond that. I'll now explain the first clue I got that Kitty was cheating. It was Saturday morning, and Nasty stopped by to talk to Kitty. No big deal, she was in the area shopping and dropped by to give Kitty something. Nasty had been to our apartment a few times like this, and I didn't have a problem with it. Even though I thought she was gross, Nasty was always friendly to me and nice to my son, so this was okay. My wife and Nasty sat in the kitchen talking for 20 minutes before Nasty had to go. Kitty got up and walked Nasty out to her car where they stood and talked some more, while Junior and I sat in the living room watching cartoons. Kitty left her phone on the end table, and it started pinging with text. I ignored the first ping, but then decided to check it after the third text came through. This wasn't an issue, as we both knew each other's passwords and openly shared our devices. The texts were all from Nasty and in some sort of code. Now I thought that was strange as I was looking out my window at Nasty talking to Kitty, so she wasn't sending the text. I looked closer at the name and saw the text were from Nasty with a plus sign, while there were other texts just from Nasty. This made me look at the numbers, and they were different. I immediately knew something wasn't right. I saw Kitty walking back to the apartment, so I quickly took down both numbers to investigate further. I was going to ask Kitty about this when she got back inside, but decided to wait and do more investigating. When she came back in, Kitty joined Junior and me to watch TV. Then about 15 minutes later, she got another text and she picked up her phone to look at it. She said it was from Nasty and said Nasty said to tell me it was nice seeing Junior and me again. I told Kitty to tell her the same and she started typing. After she sent the message to Nasty, I watched as Kitty read through the messages she missed. As she was doing so, she was smiling ear to ear. She then typed out a quick reply, smiled broadly, and put the phone down. As she put the phone down, she looked over at me and saw I was staring at her, so she came over and gave me a kiss and sat between Junior and I. The rest of the weekend was uneventful, and we had a nice time as a family, but those texts from Nasty Plus were on my mind the whole time. While Kitty was cleaning up after dinner Sunday night, I took her phone and snooped further. I saw she sent a reply of 29YY to this nasty plus yesterday. I then looked back and all the texts between them were this way. All were a 2-digit number followed by either IY or YN. I didn't know what this meant, but I knew something sneaky was going on. I needed to find out who Nasty Plus actually was. On Monday morning, I called the number from a desk phone at my office. The calls made from our desk phones come up as either unknown or private in caller ID, so I could remain anonymous. When I called the number, it went to voicemail, and it was a guy's voice. His recording said, "Hi, this is first name last name. I'll call him John Jones. Please leave a message." This John was another co-worker of Kitty's that I met at the picnic, but she never once talked about him. I knew right then that Kitty was cheating on me with this guy, and those cryptic messages between them were some sort of code they were using to meet up. I later determined that the number was the date of the month. The first Y referred to a desirable part of Kitty's body, and that Y or N at the end was a signal of whether they would be hooking up after work that day at John's place. The 29YY text he sent Kitty on Saturday was code for, "We're clear to hook up after work on the 29th. I looked the guy up on social media, but he only had a basic profile with a single profile pic, and all of his friends were hidden. I then checked Nasty's page to see if I could find something about him there. In her photos, I found a pic of Nasty and her live-in friend with benefit on a cruise with this John Jones and his girlfriend. I thought about reaching out to John's girlfriend, but then thought, what if they were all swingers like Nasty? She might not care that he's hooking up with Kitty, and actually may be into it. Instead, I decided to do more detective work myself. I left work early on the 29th and went to my wife's company and sat outside in my car until she left. I followed well behind her in my car as she drove, so she wouldn't notice me. I lost her in traffic, but I had John's address that I found by doing a simple search, so I headed that way. When I got to the street, it was a residential neighborhood. I drove by the house and didn't see Kitty's car anywhere. I went down to the end of the cul-de-sac and turned around and headed home. When I got to the apartment, Kitty wasn't there, so I waited a few minutes. I then called my mom to check in, and she said everything was fine and that my dad had taken Junior fishing in the pond behind our house. She said they should be back in a half hour or so in time for Kitty to pick him up. We talked a little more about some basic stuff before hanging up. I don't know what hit me, but something inside me was telling me to go back to that house. I went back over there and again drove by and didn't see anything, so I turned around in the cul-de-sac. As I was heading back up the street in the direction of the house, I saw Kitty's car backing out of the driveway and the garage door shutting behind her. I pulled over so she wouldn't notice me and watched as she drove off up the street. Even though I was a ways away, I could clearly see it was her. I was boiling with anger at that point and could have done something terrible, but I somehow was able to hold it together. I headed home and arrived before Kitty got there with Junior. When she arrived, she was surprised to see me. I told her I got off work early and came home to spend some time with my family. I watched her closely to see if she acted differently, but she didn't. She kissed me, and I noticed that she smelled fresh, like she had recently taken a shower. I didn't want to accept a kiss, but I knew if I refused, she would know something was up. She was cheerful as she prepared dinner while I spent time with Junior in the family room. When dinner was ready, she called us to the table and said grace, giving thanks for the food and for her husband and son. Later that evening, she tried to initiate intimacy after Junior went to bed. I rebuffed her advances in a way that wasn't obvious so she didn't get suspicious. We went to bed a little early that night and after she fell asleep. I checked her phone again as I heard her message indicator go off earlier that evening. There I saw another message from Nasty Plus that had a thumbs up symbol followed by 31YY. Now remember, this Nasty Plus is actually this John. This meant they would be hooking up again that week on the 31st, but this time I planned to confront them and catch them in the act. The following day I went to work as normal, and that evening before I went home, I stopped by my parents' house and told them what was going on. They were upset and in total disbelief. I told them I was going to confront Kitty and her lover tomorrow. Mom spoke up and told me to be careful and said for me to take Dad with me so I don't do something stupid. Dad quickly agreed. On D-Day, I again left work early and went to pick up my dad. We went to Kitty's company, waited for her to leave, and followed her car from a distance. She again went straight to John's house and drove right into the garage, and the door shut behind her. Dad and I were disgusted, and I was about to explode. We parked down the street and gave it 10 minutes before we both walked up to the front door. The house had a video doorbell, and I rang it while also knocking hard on the screen door. I looked right into the camera and said, "John, I know you're in there with Kitty and I know what you're doing. Open the door." He didn't answer. My dad then said, "Give me your keys." I asked him why, and he said he was going to move the car up and park it in front of the driveway. Dad then looked into the camera and said if they don't answer, we'll just wait here until they come out. After Dad moved the car, we sat on the hood and waited. During this time, I was calling and sending Kitty texts, but she wasn't responding. After 20 minutes of waiting around, I called Kitty's mom and dad and told them what was going on, and they came over and joined Dad and I. About 10 minutes after that, a woman drove up with a puzzled look on her face and started pointing in the direction of the driveway. I realized it was likely John's girlfriend, who I'll call Betty. I walked over to her car, and she cautiously rolled down the window. I explained who I was and what was going on. She started tearing up and got upset. She then opened the garage door, and there was my wife's car parked beside her boyfriend's Camry. Seeing this, she started pounding on the steering wheel, saying "God damn it" over and over again, with tears coming down her face. She parked her car on the street and marched up to the front door, taking out her key. She opened the door, and standing right there in the foyer was John and Kitty, fully clothed and looking at us with an innocent, "What's going on" type of look. John spoke up and said, "Hi babe, I was just talking to Kitty here about work." Betty didn't say anything. Instead, she lunged at him and started hitting him, ripping off and breaking his glasses and screaming for him to get out. Her actions were so sudden and unexpected, Dad and I didn't have a chance to react. John didn't attempt to defend himself, and Betty was landing blows. He eventually made it out to his car, got in and locked the doors. Betty then grabbed a metal garden rake and started swinging it at the car, breaking the driver's side mirror and windshield wiper, and denting and scratching the driver's door. I managed to calm her down after a few minutes, but she was seething. The entire time, Kitty was standing there on the front lawn crying, with her parents asking her what the hell she was doing there. I then turned to Kitty and told her not to try explaining, as I already knew everything. I then told her to not even think about ever coming home and that we were done. She started crying and tried hugging her mother, but her mother told her to get away. Kitty then started jumping around and crying, and then ran and got in her car. I spoke to her parents and told them that I would be keeping Junior and she was not to come to my house. I told them they were welcomed anytime, but for now she was banned until we worked things out in the court. After this, my dad and I left, and he drove as I was too upset. We went back to my parents' house and told Mom what happened. My heart was pounding so hard, and my blood pressure had to be astronomical. I was so riled up, I almost puked. The thing that settled me down was seeing Junior. When he saw me, he ran over and gave me a hug, and I rapidly calmed down almost instantly. About an hour later, the calls from Kitty started. I didn't answer any of them, but listened to a few of her messages. She was crying and saying what she did was a mistake, and she'll never do it again. She begged for a second chance and said she was going to quit her job tomorrow and ask if we could start over. I sent her one response text stating, "Get a lawyer, I'm divorcing you." She kept calling and sending me texts all night, so I put my phone on silent and ignored her. The following day, I took the day off and kept Junior out of preschool. Junior and I and my parents went to the science center. We've been wanting to take him there for a while, and I thought it would be a good distraction for all of us. We had a great time and Junior loved the place. Later that evening, I explained to Junior that Mommy would be staying with his other grandparents for a while, and that he and I would be staying here with Grammy and Pops for a while, and that he would see Mommy a few times per week. He was fine with this as he had his own room at my parents' house and they spoiled him rotten. He asked if his mom was sick. In my head, I was thinking yes, but told him she and I had business to work out, and once we did, he would see her more often, but she would have her own place. He didn't fully understand this, but accepted what I said and went back to playing his video game. The following evening, I agreed to meet with Kitty at her parents' house. I again took Dad there with me for support and as a witness. Kitty first tried explaining her actions, but I told her not to bother because it didn't matter. I told her what's done is done, and I was divorcing her. She pleaded with me for another chance, but I told her no, there would be no second chances and that we would be getting divorced. I then told her Junior would be staying with me and my parents until everything got sorted out legally. Kitty then told me if I divorced her, she wouldn't have any reason to live. I then asked her parents and my father to join us, and I told them what she said. She was crying with her head down on the couch, and her mother went over to talk to her. Kitty's dad then spoke up and said he was going to find this John Jones and make him sorry he ever met Kitty. I told him not to do it as he's not worth it. Kitty's dad and I get along well, and I told him I didn't want him to get in trouble. We spoke for a few more minutes, then Dad and I left. I didn't hear from Kitty that night, but the next morning she called and left me a message saying she had resigned from her job. I didn't respond to her, but thought to myself, great, now she doesn't have an income, so I'll be paying through the nose. Kitty kept contacting me, trying to get me to take her back, but I only responded when she had a question about Junior. I met with a lawyer and gave her the green light to move forward with the filing. We live in a state where cheating still matters in divorce, so my attorney says we're in good shape there since I have two witnesses, my dad and Betty. A strange thing happened to me a few days after all this went down. I got a call from Nasty, Kitty's former coworker. Nasty starts off telling me she was sorry about Kitty and me and said she feels responsible for this happening. She said she encouraged Kitty to get into an FWB relationship with John and that she and John were once FWBs before but no longer were. She said John wanted to get back into an FWB with her, but she didn't want to. So she connected him with Kitty, who had expressed an interest in experimenting with an FWB relationship to her, and that's how their relationship started. Nasty said I shouldn't think about what she did as love, saying it was just a physical outlet for Kitty, and that this side piece could actually enhance our marriage. I couldn't believe this witch was actually trying to feed me this nonsense, so I stopped her mid-sentence and told her that she, Kitty, John, and whoever else is engaging in this sick behavior are disgusting pieces of trash, and to never call me again. I then disconnected the call and blocked her number. What was she thinking by telling me this? A couple days later, I got another unexpected call from someone, but this time the person had something worthwhile to tell me. It was Betty. She was calling to give me an update and to see how I was doing. Betty told me that after everyone left her house on D-Day, she found a bag of illegal substance on the dresser in her bedroom. Not knowing what to do, she called her father, who told her to call the police, so that's what she did. She told the officers the substance wasn't hers and then explained that she just kicked her ex-boyfriend and his girlfriend, Kitty, out of her house earlier and that the substance had to belong to one of them. Betty then told me that John is a felon who served a stint inside for battery when he was 22. He's now 37. She said she thought he had cleaned up his act, and that's why she gave him a chance and ended up falling in love with him. Betty said she feels like such a fool now, as he was basically living free in her house and he was using and cheating on her right under her nose. I told her not to beat herself up too much, as I too was fooled by Kitty. We both vowed to never be fooled again. That night, I went over to my in-laws to have a discussion with Kitty and her parents about what Betty told me. Again, I took my dad with me to witness everything. I think Kitty thought I was coming over to reconcile, but when I told her the reason for my visit, she broke down crying. She swore she didn't know John was a felon and swears she knew nothing about the substance. I was really steamed and told her, "Do you see how you put our lives in danger?" She said yes and kept saying she was sorry. I told her I will not allow her to see Junior again until she gets a complete drug test done. She kept crying, but agreed to get the test without any further pressure from me. I told my lawyer about my wife's lover being a convicted felon and about Betty finding illegal substances in her house that likely belonged to him. My lawyer said this was terrible, but then said it was great news for me, as this information, along with Kitty being a cheater, would more than likely be enough for me to secure full custody of Junior if we pushed for it. I was undecided at that point on whether I should push for full custody. My attorney said I should, and we should tender all the evidence. I was hesitant because I knew that would destroy Kitty, and I didn't want to do that, After all, she is Junior's mother. Kitty's parents begged me not to do it and instead suggested a 60-40 split where I have Junior 4 days and Kitty has him for 3. In the end, I followed the recommendations of my attorney and let her present to the judge the information regarding the fact that Kitty had an affair with a felon. She also entered into evidence the police report about the illegal substances found at the home where John lived. Kitty's attorney objected to this, stating the substance didn't belong to his client and she has never used any type of illegal or prescription drug. Kitty's attorney also provided copies of 2 drug tests Kitty took right after D-Day that showed she was clean. The judge reviewed all the information and said it was relevant. The judge ended up granting the divorce and awarding me primary custody of Junior. I have him from Tuesday through Saturday, and Kitty has him Sunday and Monday. Junior and I moved into a new apartment 5 minutes from my parents' house, so everything was great there. Kitty is still living with her parents and has started a new clerical job at the church her family attends. She has also gotten back into her religion in a big way, and it seems to have really helped her straighten up. In addition to her clerical job, she also teaches Sunday school and vacation Bible school. Junior attends church with Kitty and her family and enjoys going to the Sunday school class they have for kindergarten-age kids. Since Kitty's new job pays less than what she was making before, and the cost of living is so high around here, she'll need to keep living with her parents unless she gets a roommate. I hope she continues living with my ex-in-laws as I feel much better about Junior being with them when Kitty has him. Also, I forgot to add earlier that the judge did not require me to pay any alimony due to the infidelity and no child support since Junior is in my care 5 days a week. Overall, I'd say things are pretty good for us now, though I wish all this never happened, and I still do miss Kitty now and then. Kitty has finally realized that we're never getting back together, though I know she desperately wants to, as her parents tell me that's all she talks about. Thankfully, she no longer brings this up to me when we're doing our handoffs. I've not started dating again, and I have no interest in doing so anytime soon. I'm going to concentrate on Junior and my work and have a short-term goal of saving up for a down payment on a house. Also, before I go, I wanted to address some of the questions you had about John and Betty. First off, Betty and I haven't hooked up and don't plan to as we're not each other's type, but I very much appreciate all her help in this. She reported John's affair with Kitty and the illegal substances found at her home to John's company. John was let go a few days later, but Betty didn't know the reason, but believes the company likely conducted a random drug test, and that's why. Also, Betty told me recently that Nasty is no longer working at that company. She doesn't know why, but jokingly told me it was probably due to her sleeping with all of her coworkers, which I wouldn't doubt. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Until next time, I'll see you again. Take care.